Hi, my name is KD. This is part two of the session on billing and cost management in OCI. Uh, if you have not seen part one, it would be helpful to review part one before you go to part two. But the topics I cover in the second part are independent of what I covered in part one. What we did in part one was essentially look at the billing and account management options that you can see in OCI console. We looked at the cost analysis tools that gives you trend lines on how your costs in OCI have performed, and you can filter by dates, and you can filter by tags and compartments. You can use budgets, which let you specify soft limits on how much a particular cost tracking tag or a compartment is allowed to use. You can set up budget alerts so that if the projected cost or actual costs are going to be more than a threshold, you can send a custom email to one or more email addresses with the budget alert. We looked at usage reports, which is a CSV file that gives a lot of detail about how the resources are being used in OCI. One report per 24 hours, and we retain the reports for 1 year, and each line in the CSV file contains usage of one resource in OCI per hour. Uh, in this session, I'm going to start with service limits and usage of OCI resources. Then I'm going to cover compartment quotas, and finally we'll wrap this topic up with some cost management best practices. So this is all part one. So I'm going to skip these slides. We talked about, I summarized all these things. So let's start with the new topic, which is service limits and usage. When you're operating in OCI, it's important for you to know what the default limits for your usage in OCI are. Uh, Almost all these limits, or most of these limits, are soft limits. Uh, you can check these limits, and you can make service requests to get these limits increased right from the OCI console. So important to keep tab of this. Let's go to OCI console and see what these where you can see these limits and make the request for increasing these limits as well. Okay, I've logged into my OCI console. You can get to this information from two places. One is you can go to administration and go to tenancy details. And right here, you will see your service limits for what you are allowed to use by default in OCI. And the second place is if you go to governance, this is where you can visit the limits, quotas, and usage page. This not only gives you your service limits, but it also talks about what your current usage is and how much is available. And if you, and this goes service by service, right? So if you want to increase a service limit, you can fill a simple form by providing your contact information. Once you provide that, uh, you then specify which service you want to get the service limit increased by, and for that service, which resource are you requesting the increase. You can add additional resources in a single request. You provide a reason for the request, and then you submit the request right here. And we try to uh, look at these requests and try to respond within one business day, but it might take longer in some cases. Okay, Next thing we need to, or you want to look at, is the compartment quotas. The notion of quotas is that it gives administrators a better control over how resources are consumed in OCI. Quotas enable you to easily allocate resources to compartments using OCI console. We'll look at an example soon. Along with budgets that we discussed in the first part of this topic. Uh, so quotas and budgets combined give you a powerful tool set to manage your spending in OCI. Uh, so quotas essentially let you define how much of a particular resource can be used in a compartment, and budgets let you create alert on if those budget values are going to be exceeded. So combined together, you can manage your costs in OCI very nicely. In a sense, your compartment quotas are similar to service limits that we just looked at, but the biggest difference is that service limits are set by Oracle, and compartment quotas are set by administrators in the tenancy. And compartment quotas are set using uh, policies that allow you to allocate resources with a high level of flexibility. This policy statement is these policy statements are written in a fairly simple declarative language, which is similar to the IAM policy language. Okay, let's take a look at the quota policy language and how you can write these statements. There are three types of quota policy statements. There are set statements, unset statements, and zero statements. The set statements set the maximum number of a cloud resource that can be used for a compartment. So this is what you use to specify the limit. The unset uh, statement resets the quotas back to the default service limits. So you can unset what you had set previously. And then there is the zero statements. The zero statements actually removes access to a cloud resource completely for a compartment. Uh, when you are writing a statement, you see these three examples for the three type of statements. The very first thing you do is start with a action keyword. The action keyword can be set, unset, or zero. And after that action keyword, you then specify the name of the service family. For example, you can specify compute or block volume uh, or any other OCI service family name here. Uh, this is followed by the quota or the quotas, plural keyword. Uh, Following that comes the name of the quota. The name of the quota varies with the service family. An example is for the compute family, the name could be something like VM-standard 2-16-count. So that's a quota name keyword. A good thing about using names is that you can specify wildcards. So rather than mentioning VM dash standard something something, you can just say VM dash star, right, or VM dash standard star, and then this would match all the wildcard characters for you. Makes it more flexible and easy. Uh, and then after name, what you put depends on the type of the statement. For the set statements, then you put the value of the quota here. Uh, and then you specify the compartment for that quota. And in the very end, there's an optional condition statement. This condition statement can be, for example, where request dot region is equal to us dash phoenix dash one, right? Currently, the conditions that can be used are request.region and request.ad, where it is available. Some other um, examples. The first example here only allows one compute instance in a compartment called IT, and for a single region. The first statement says zero compute quotas in tenancy, so it's removing access to all compute resources, and then it only allows one kind of instance, VM standard 2-1, and it allows uh, only up to 10 of these in the compartment IT, and then only in the region US Phoenix region in this case. The second example also zeroes out the compute quotas, and then uh, it unsets any quotas on VM dense IO1 kind of shape. So the limits are now enforced by the default service limits. The compartment quotas can be set on the root compartment, and an administrator can set quotas on their own compartments and any child compartments. The quotas set on a parent compartment override quotas set on child compartments. So this way, uh, the administrator of a parent compartment can create a quota on a child compartment, but the child compartment cannot uh, override what the parent compartment quota policy statement says. Uh, and in terms of precedence, if there is more than one policy for the same resource, the most restrictive policy is actually applied, and the service limits always take precedence over quotas. Although it is possible to specify a quota for a resource that exceeds the service limit for that resource, it does not really mean anything. The service limit is still going to be enforced. If you need to increase the service limit, you'll have to make that request, like I discussed before. So let's look at setting quota policies. So let me log into my OCI console. And the quota information is available under governance, limits, quotas, and usage. And uh, then let's look at quota policies. Uh, in quota policies, I've already created a policy. This policy, in this case, is around block volumes. So you can set block storage quota volume count to 10 in compartment called IT. So no more than 10 block volumes can be created there. Let's look at an example of creating a new quota policy. Let's call it uh, the ADW policy. And this is where you can specify one or more languages. So you can say set, like the example I gave you, set database quota adw-ocpu count to 2 in compartment, I have a compartment called IT. Uh, uh, I have a typo. Okay. And to look at all the different options, you can actually go to the documentation page. On this documentation page for quotas, you can get detailed information on uh, all the keywords and scope, and you have descriptions of this goes service by service. So this shows how to specify quotas on different compute services, and it gives some useful examples as well. Okay, with that, let's wrap up and summarize. Uh, So the cost management best practices is essentially everything we discussed in part one and part two of this topic are good practices that you should follow for effective uh, cost management in OCI. Uh, for example, you can use the cost analysis tools to filter the data that you're interested in, and then you can look at trends of how things are changing over time, or with cost tracking tags, etc. You should create budgets that match your commitment, and you should set up budget alerts so that you get an early warning if your spending increases and you're getting a risk of an overage, so you can receive emails about that. Uh, you should use cost tracking tags to allocate costs in more granular ways, and these cost tracking tags can be used with budgets as well. Uh, you should use separate compartments for cost management, and when you have compartment, let's say you have a compartment per department, there are multiple departments sharing the same OCI tenancy. uh, it's easy to then do cross charging based on which compartment is costing how much in OCI, and it's also easy to then set up compartment quotas like we just discussed, so that you can allocate different amount of resources for different compartments more easily. Uh, you should enable monitoring on all your resources, and you can get usage report data, uh, and you can now import the CSV files from usage reports to uh, analyze your costs and create your custom dashboards. All right, so that brings us to the end of part two of this session. Thank you for your time.